God Love Never Fails, heard daily on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC Commerce.
Portions of KDKR's daily programming do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, with interest rates going up, what are the options for buying a home? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, interest rates are going up. What does that mean for the real estate markets? Today, mortgage consultant and Prudent Money contributor Mark Pfeiffer is here to give us his take. Mark, always good to have you on the program.
Always good to be here, Bob.
I got to tell you something funny. This morning I was prepping for our little bit of our talk today, and I looked down and noticed I was drinking out of the none other Mortgage Mark coffee cup. my wife brought it. My wife brought it to me to give me a cup of coffee, and I had no idea. And there it was.
I love it. Just marketing works, I guess, right?
Yeah, branding is everywhere. So let's talk a little bit about mortgages and real estate. And I just got to thinking, wow, what a difference a year makes.
Holy smokes.
I
Isn't that the
mean,
truth?
just, and you know, who knows where it goes from here, but talk about what you're seeing right now.
You know, so exactly, you know, I mean, a year, I'll tell you what it means in terms of rates. I mean, rates have literally doubled and then some compared to about a year ago. So, you know, from an affordability standpoint, isn't it nuts? And okay, Bob, let me just start by saying I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I recognize that. But I will say I pay a lot of money for a lot of different subscriptions, and I pay attention, and I have been doing this for nearly 20 years. But back in February and March, you know, we work with, you know, a lot of builders, which means there's a long time till closing happens. And we, back in February, March of this year, when rates were still in the 4s, we're already qualifying people in the 7s, just in anticipation of rates doing what they've done. And it's not to say that I'm you know, that smart, but obviously after a while you get to know what you're doing, and sometimes you get lucky. But yeah, rates. I mean, FreddieMac.com. You know, I like to use that so it keeps me out of trouble with compliance. But FreddieMac.com shows rates at 6.92 with 0.8 points. So in other words, rates are in the 7s, and you're paying money to get there, and it's pretty wild. Where just, you know, I remember. So I did a loan, and I'm not bragging, just saying, but Caroline and I did a loan back in December of last year, and we got a 3.4 interest rate, right? So now you put that in today's terms as far as dollars, and that's about a 40 to 50% increase in mortgage payment. So it's certainly put a real, you know, it's a real hit to somebody's cash flow on a monthly basis for sure.
So talk a little bit about, you know, the focus, of course, is on mortgage rates and then real estate prices. So how have prices, you know, last time we talked, they're kind of budging, but it was almost kind of like buyers and sellers were just kind of sitting there staring at each other, nobody doing anything. But it seems like prices are starting to adjust. I mean, you know, downward obviously for higher rates. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's funny. So one of my marketing gals, I know she just totally loves this. He said with, you know, sarcasm, but you know, I hit her with about 5 or 6 articles I was reading this morning for our weekly news or weekly update that we do to our business partners, and it's like the articles themselves are two-faced, meaning, you know, the headline. So one of them was, I think, the New York Post said something about asking prices tumble at record pace. Right, as mortgage rates surge, like that's the headline I'm looking at now. So I pulled it up, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh!" Like you hear that and you're thinking that's horrible, right? And so they're like, about 8% of homes listed reported price drops. Well, again, that's only 8%, and last year that was 4%. So when you figure, you know, in the grand scheme of things, if 100 homes are selling, that's only 8 homes that have dropped their price. And then they go on to say that appreciation still is robust, and we're still seeing signs of appreciation occur. So it's kind of like what I've been, and I'm sure I know you've been seeing the emails I send out, but activity is down. There's no question, right? As far as the number of leads, the number of buyers that are out there in the market, absolutely, there's no question to that. But to say that the market's, soft or tumbling or crashing, again, for the most part, especially Dallas-Fort Worth, we are so blessed to have all the things that we have here. We got people still coming in from other states that are in far worse shape than us, and it's still a very good buy. So it's really interesting because, again, I don't see prices softening. Where you will see it typically is like new construction. If a builder has 8 or 9 homes coming on, like just finishing this month, then sure, there's a glut of inventory in that one specific location. And so you will see some incentives, you will see some price drops. But overall, it's really weird, Bob, because you're right, activity's down, but the housing shortage is a real thing to where it's still a fairly well-balanced market, which makes it pretty wild.
Yeah, you said it right. I mean, I think that we are very, very lucky to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where things are a little bit different. Would you describe it as, and let me back up and say this too. One thing, and I'm glad you pointed out, people have got to realize that unless it's sensationalized in a headline, nobody's going to read it.
Amen.
And it's just like, oh gosh, get me started. But I was watching a very popular Fox News host who has her own show. We'll just leave it at that. And she starts talking about the bear market in stocks and how it's going to take years to come back from this. And I'm like, we're only down like 25% year to date. See, I mean, we could be up positive by the end of the year. I mean, this is not
absolutely.
This is not a dramatic drop by any stretch yet. I mean, it could go there, but at this point, to say it's going to take years is kind of ridiculous.
Well, and I'll just echo what you just said as far as advertising, like truth in advertising, right? So, like you said, the headlines sell, right? That's what's going to make this the clickbait that gets you to watch something. And there's a mortgage lender out there that shall remain nameless, but I got beef with them because they're on they're constantly running commercials, and the things they say, like, kudos to their marketing department for figuring out different ways to say things really cute to get people to call. And so, for example, a couple of headlines, and this isn't just that one. I've seen this from other lenders. Like, initially they were like free refi when you purchase with us, because the reality is, Bob, I think most professionals are going to, I'll just say me. I know there are others out there, but I will say I believe that rates can and will be coming down in the next 12 to 24 months. And we can go into why I think that here in a second. But the reality is, I'm telling my team, everybody we're doing a loan for today is a refinance candidate in the next 12 to 24 months if and when rates go down. But you're seeing advertisers saying free refi, free refi. Well, I think they got in trouble because now their verbiage on their newer commercials are streamline refi or something like that, because you know as well as I do, nothing's free. Nobody's out there doing volunteer work to get people mortgages. So it's those headlines that make people click. And again, look, is there an affordability issue? Yeah. I mean, let's face it, but if your mortgage payment's 50% more expensive now because of the rates, and house prices they stay the same or keep going up, it just makes it really expensive. And I don't know the fix for that. That is the head scratcher that says, man, what's going to give? Because, at some point when your starter home here in Dallas-Fort Worth is $400,000, the only part I'll argue, look at the coast, Seattle, California, their starter homes have been $700 and $1 million for a long time, and they're still cooking. So at $400,000, that's not the end of the world here in Dallas-Fort Worth. It just seems expensive to us locals that have been here for a long time.
I guess that it comes down to the point that buyers, and I don't know that we're quite there yet, but the point that buyers make that shift in mindset from rising prices, oh, I got to buy, to falling prices, oh, I got to wait. And kind of wait, the psychology is really interesting, I guess is the best word to put it for right now.
Yeah, and I'll say this too about that. So, we were doing loans the last 2 years, and you and I talked about the nuttiness of the market and the craze and the emotion behind it. We were doing loans where folks were saying, man, they paid $70,000 more for a house over the ask. But they did it. Nobody ever said like, oh, that's the worth of the house, or that's the value. They did it because they had 12 other people behind them that wanted to buy it. So again, the housing, quote unquote, housing prices falling, again, I think it's just they were paying a premium and they knew it. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there, but for the most part, most people were like, no, I understand I'm paying a premium, but it's what I need to do to get in a home. And so, some of that is the mentality now when they say, oh, prices are coming down. I'm going to argue right now. I think now is a great time to be a buyer. And you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And here's why. Activity is down. There are less buyers out there, but houses are still appreciating in or at least our market. It's still projected to be a pretty good market. Yes, again, there can be pockets where it may dip a little. I don't foresee a crash. I got it because we're not in the 07-08 time period for different reasons, right? But I would say housing prices at least staying stable. You got less competition right now because there are a lot of folks on the sidelines. Either they can't afford today's prices, or they just think they'll wait until everything comes down. But if you buy today, the part I heard this. I'm borrowing, so I didn't make this up. But I got folks saying, "Hey, marry the house and date the rate," right? So, meaning if rates come down next year, if you get in, there's a lot of cool things out there. And I saw an article saying the 2-1 buy down. We can talk about that too if you want. But there's programs out there that at least get you in the house with a lower monthly payment. ARMs are making a comeback. They're now more than 10% of the market, and historically for the last 5 to 10 years, they've been like 2%. So there are ways to get into where the payment can be more manageable up front, thinking and knowing that rates can and may go down in the near future to refinance out of it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting as it unfolds and turns into whatever the new normal is, especially with interest rates. I think, and we got about 30 seconds before we got a break here, Mark, just so that you know. I think that it comes down to your theory that interest rates are going to come back down. I think that the Fed suppresses demand and suppresses the economy to the point that it brings everything back down. And ultimately, what people need to remember is there is a deflationary pull in this economy based on debt, and that means lower interest rates. There's our break. I'll catch you on the other side on that. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. We're up against the break. Stick around. Be right back. Hi, this is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Well, 2022 has been a miserable year for investing. Will 2023 bring the same? Times like this have a way of making us feel stuck, not knowing what to do. Well, there are 2 keys to success in any kind of market. First, you have to be informed, but second, you have to receive that information in a way that anyone can understand it. This is my objective with the next Prudent Money webinar. There are 5 main questions that you should be asking right now. Number 1, what is a bear market and what does a bear market really look like? This could tell us a whole lot about 2023. Number 2, why is it important to understand cycles when it comes to growing my retirement? Number 3, what do I need to know about inflation? How high will these prices go? How do I protect myself from inflation? Number 4, why should I be careful with bonds? Number 5, what steps do I take now? What are my options? Well, if you're unsure about the future, then this webinar is for you. Sign up now for the 5 questions that could save your retirement. There's 2 times we're going to present this webinar. The first one is on Wednesday, October 26th at noon, and the second one is Friday, October the 28th at noon as well. Today, sign up at prudentmoney.com. Hi, this is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. Well, 2022 has been a miserable year for investing. Will 2023 bring the same? Times like this have a way of making us feel stuck, not knowing what to do. Well, there are 2 keys to success in any kind of market. First, you have to be informed, but second, you have to receive that information in a way that anyone can understand it. This is my objective with the next Prudent Money webinar. There are 5 main questions that you should be asking right now. Number 1, what is a bear market and what does a bear market really look like? This could tell us a whole lot about 2023. Number 2, why is it important to understand cycles when it comes to growing my retirement? Number 3, what do I need to know about inflation? How high will these prices go? How do I protect myself from inflation? Number 4, why should I be careful with bonds? Number 5, what steps do I take now? What are my options? Well, if you're unsure about the future, then this webinar is for you. Sign up now for the 5 questions that could save your retirement. There's 2 times we're going to present this webinar. The first one is on Wednesday, October 26th at noon, and the second one is Friday, October the 28th at noon as well. Today, sign up at prudentmoney.com.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Listen daily, 3:30 p.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I want to apologize for the double dose of the webinar promo. It just happens. Sometimes these things happen, and I sat there and I thought to myself, you got to be asking yourself 2 questions. Number 1, is he going to do it a third time? And number 2, why does this really seem like a long promo to you? And it didn't seem like that when I first put it together this morning, Mark, but when I hear it twice, it just seems very long.
I just thought it was such good info that you just really need to drive it home. That's really what I thought. If you missed the pen and paper on the first round, you got it on the second one.
Well, you certainly had the opportunity, unfortunately. But I appreciate everybody's sense of humor on that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, the environment is what the environment is. And how, the one of the big questions is, how should a buyer prepare mortgage-wise when the environment for interest rates is so volatile? It's constantly changing, moving around. What do you do? Or do you just kind of just play it by ear?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And everybody's situation is obviously going to be unique. So I understand that we're talking just big picture. But I think the first and foremost, right, is talk to a lender, talk to a mortgage professional, and find out what you think. And if you want, go conservative. Find out what you think that, if rates are going to go up to 7.5 or 8 or whatever number you want to use, find out what that high-end side of the payment could be, right? And if you can stomach that, if you can say, man, I can make that work and that's in the budget and that's something we want to do. As I said earlier, I do think it's something where, you just kind of mentally prep that you're going to most likely be refinancing in 12 to 24 months if rates do go down. So I think the part is just making sure you understand what that high end of the budget is, because when you take 30, 60, 90 days to find it, like you said, Bob, in this volatile market, 1 week the rates can be in the high 6s, the next they can be in the mid 7s. So I would just say find that conservative number where you feel good. And then secondly, talk to a mortgage professional and see if there's programs out there that, can soften the sticker shock in terms of payment. So, it's funny. People think in terms of payment. While we all focus on rate, it can come down to payment that determines whether you move or not. So for new construction, for example, I alluded to it earlier, builders are giving away incentives. If they got 7 or 8 houses hitting the ground in 1 month and there's, it's just the timing didn't work out in their favor, they might be able to say, hey, we're going to help you pay for closing costs. And some of those dollars can be put towards lowering your interest rate, whether it's a permanent, lowering of your rate or using it to temporarily buy it down. Either way, it can help with that payment. So as far as planning and prepping, I think 1 is figure out kind of where it is. If you're out looking today, figure out where that high side is going to be. And then 2, just kind of mentally prep that you'll probably be doing the paperwork again in the next year or 2 if and when rates come down. And that's going to be something we talk about later this year, Bob, around Christmas time, is when to refinance. Don't do it too soon, right? If rates are on the way down next year, you're going to find, and that's where you and I will really drive home what we talked about earlier, the bad info and the headlines and people calling you saying, do this. You got to make sure it makes financial sense before you do it. But for today's purpose, to answer your question, just kind of know where that high end is and make sure it's in the budget where you guys feel comfortable making it happen.
So do you suggest that buyers lock in a rate at this point? Or, how do you manage? I know you got to manage that a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, my crystal ball. So full disclaimer, Mark Pfeiffer, individual person, you can't predict the future. We all know that. My crystal ball says that I do think rates go up, a touch here over the next 30 to 60 days. I've been saying for a long time, we'll see if I'm right. I think inflation is going to peak in the November report. So call it next month. And I think December and January will kind of validate that. And once inflation numbers show is peaking and even dropping to some degree early next year, I think that's when that you will start to see our mortgage rates come down. So again, I do recommend locking today. If somebody comes in today and says, hey, I had a contract, we lock them the second we get them if we can. And just because, again, Bob, that's a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, rates went up about 0.5 point in one day. Now, again, the subsequent days, they did come back down, but that's when the UK basically said they were doing all these things that were inflationary and it was, bad news blues. And you just, with this volatility, we just take it while, if the market's favorable and we like it, let's lock it and not get greedy. So it is something that I would say lock sooner than later, just because you just don't know in this market. I could say there's more chances for rates going up than they are coming down in the near future.
Let's switch gears for a minute and talk a little bit about an alternative. You've already mentioned it at one point, and just want to talk a little. I can't believe we're now talking about it. It wasn't much of a discussion last year, of course, but talk about how an ARM works.
Yeah, so what's funny is, and I saw this stat, probably about a year ago when this started coming around. So we obviously try to do our best to advise clients and look at what's coming and all that. And so it was about not quite a year ago, call it 9 months ago, where rates started moving up, and you think, oh man, are we finally going to get back in an ARM market? And the answer is it can be that way. So ARMs, for those that don't know, an ARM stands for, it's an acronym for Adjustable Rate Mortgage. And I'll give one example. I think that's the best way to describe what it is. Let's say there's a 5-1 ARM out there. That means your interest rate's going to be fixed for 5 years. That's that 5 number. So a 5-1 ARM, the rate gets fixed when you close, and it's that rate for the next 5 years, and that's what your payments are based off, and everything's good. But after 5 years, your rate's going to adjust every year thereafter. That's the 1 in that scenario. So every year after that, you don't know what your payments will be. And that's what makes ARMs, I don't want to say scary, but it's just the uncertainty of it. Well, in a market like this, where if somebody were to say, I do think rates can and will be going down in the near future, a 5-year ARM is not a bad plan because, again, in theory, you should get a lower rate for taking an ARM. And then, you take that lower rate, lower payment, and then you'll be refinancing out of that sometime before that 5 years. The reason why I stress that word in theory, Bob, is right now what you're seeing is the market. It's not just me making this up, but the market's suggesting and already anticipating a refi boom coming. And if somebody makes a mortgage, if a company says, okay, we're going to give this mortgage out, typically, Bob, and this is not very commonly known, it takes that company about 5 years to make their money back to buy that mortgage. So for all the work and all the effort, it takes about 5 years to break even. And so if somebody's going to refinance a year or two from now, they lose their money. Right, so to offset that, that's why points can exist, or that's why they charge money up front, so they get revenue today. So what we've seen with a lot of ARMs is while the rates are lower, there's a big old cost associated with them in terms of points, and that's where you just got to do the math. And that's not something that can be a generic, here's what it is. That's going to be case specific. You guys work with a mortgage professional you trust, have them walk that through that with you. But yeah, they're, like I said, the last stat I saw, I think they're about 12 to 14% of the market. When the last decade they've been about 2% of the market.
So talk a little bit. Just give us an example. I think would help people to understand. Take a 5-year ARM. What could and lock it in at whatever you think the rate is today, and then estimate what it would be in years 6 and 7.
Sure. So let's again, going back to keep me out of the hot water with compliance, folks. Anybody listening? So Freddie Mac, if you go to FreddieMac.com, we all know I like to use that because, again, it's not trying to make a phone ring. Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae are, they're the agencies of the government that are quasi, government owned. But those are the agencies, so you can't go get a loan from them. That's where mortgage folks like myself, that's where we go to sell these things. But I'm going to use round numbers. Freddie Mac says 6.92 for a 30-year fix. So we're going to call that 7% for round numbers. And they say their 5-1 ARM is 5.8. So we're going to go ahead and just use a 6% for that. So we'll use 7 and 6 as our two numbers. So if you get a 5-1 ARM and you take a rate of 6% today with that, you're paying interest on that 6% for the next 5 years. What you don't know is what is it going to be in year 6? Because pro and con, rates could go up or they could go down. So year 6, you will pay, and so this is where ARMs will have a max or a cap is what they call it. To where if you got a 6% rate today, they're saying no matter what, you can't go above 5% beyond the 6% you get. So that makes 5 plus 6 is 11. That means if the world comes to an end and we go back to the rates of the 80s, where you hear people talk about buying houses when rates were at 18%, your ARM protects you from a max of 11% in this example. The 6% you start with plus a 5% cap. Rates should go down. And so maybe your 6% ends up being 4% in year 6. You just don't know. And that's why ARMs are typically viewed as a shorter-term solution because, again, most folks are going to try to get out of that thing before that adjustment starts. You don't have to, but that's just kind of the mentality most folks will take.
Well, I'll tell you what, it'll be interesting to see what transpires between today and the next time we talk. It just seems like so much happens in those 30 days. But once again, Mark Pfeiffer, his website is mortgagemark.com. And Mark, always a pleasure to talk to you. Glad you could come on the program. We will talk to you next month.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. For someone who watches this play out on a day-to-day basis, I am just absolutely fascinated with what's happening in mortgage, not mortgage so much, but the real estate markets, because this is one of those things where everybody could watch what was happening. You could see the greed, you could see the price pressures. You could, if you want to call it a bubble, you could call it a bubble. There's a debate on that, whether it was one or not, or is one or not. And then you can debate on how it plays out. But it's just interesting because it's going to play out however it's going to play out. And it's almost like watching a Cat 5 hurricane in the Gulf coming towards shore and wondering if it's going to downgrade, or if it's going to get weaker and just be a Cat 1, or is it really going to be a Cat 5? You can kind of just predict all you want, but it's tough to say. Once again, Mark Pfeiffer, mortgagemark.com. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and if you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com. Send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.